The fluorescent lights hummed quietly in the small corner store as Darlene Washington wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that day. At 52 years old, she had learned that running a store meant endless cleaning, restocking, and small talk with customers who'd become more like family over the years. The bell above the door chimed every few minutes as neighbors stopped by for milk, bread, or just to chat about their day. Darlene's store sat at the corner of 5th and Madison in Oakland, sandwiched between a laundromat and a barbershop that had been there since the 70s. The neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was home. She knew every crack in the sidewalk, every face that passed by her window, every story behind the tired eyes of the mothers buying formula at midnight. This was her community now, and she protected it the only way she knew how. By being present, by staying open when other stores had closed, by extending credit to families who were struggling until payday. Most people who walked into the store saw a heavy-set black woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. They saw someone who moved with purpose but never seemed rushed. What they didn't see were the 20 years she'd spent in the Army, the combat boots she used to wear before trading them for comfortable sneakers, the deployments to places she still couldn't talk about in detail, the hand-to-hand combat training that had become as natural as breathing. Sergeant Major Darlene Washington, retired, didn't advertise her military background. A small flag pin on her collar and a faded photo near the register showing her in dress uniform were the only hints. She'd left that life behind 3 years ago, trading her rank and rifle for a cash register and a mop. Some days she missed it, the structure, the purpose, the camaraderie. But most days, she felt she was still serving, just in a different way. "Miss Darlene, you got any of them cookies left?" Old Mr. Chen asked as he shuffled to the counter with his evening newspaper. "Saved you 2 packs, just like always," Darlene smiled, pulling them from under the counter. "Your granddaughter coming by this weekend?" "Saturday morning. She wants to help me in the garden." His weathered face lit up the way it always did when he talked about family. These moments made everything worth it. The long hours, the thin profit margins, the occasional shoplifter. Darlene had opened this store because the neighborhood needed it. The big chains had pulled out years ago, leaving people to travel miles for basic groceries. She'd used her military savings and a small business loan to buy the property and stock the shelves. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The evening crowd had thinned out by 9 o'clock. Just a few customers browsing the aisles, picking up last-minute items before heading home. Darlene was restocking the candy section when she heard the door chime again. This time, the sound was followed by loud voices and laughter that had an edge to it. The kind of laughter that made people nervous. 5 young men walked in, all probably in their late teens or early 20s. Baggy clothes, cocky walks, that particular energy that screamed trouble. Darlene had seen enough in her life to recognize a bad situation before it fully developed. She straightened up, her military instincts quietly clicking into place even as she kept her expression neutral and friendly. "Evening, gentlemen. Let me know if you need help finding anything," she said in her usual warm tone. The tallest one, clearly the leader of the group, looked her up and down with obvious disdain. "Yo, check out this place. They got a whole dinosaur running the register." His friends laughed louder than the joke deserved. The other customers in the store glanced up, then quickly looked away. One woman with a young child immediately put her items down and headed for the door. Darlene noticed but didn't react. "Not yet. You need something specific or you just browsing?" Darlene kept her voice even. "Man, look at this lady. Look at her." The leader nudged one of his friends. "They got Big Bertha working the night shift." The words were meant to sting. Darlene had heard worse. 20 years in the military, especially as a woman, especially as a black woman, meant developing thick skin. She'd been called everything imaginable by people trying to break her spirit. These kids were amateurs. "You gonna buy something or not?" Darlene asked, her tone still polite but firmer now. "Damn, she even sounds tough. You think you tough, lady?" The leader stepped closer to the counter, invading the space between them. "We just came in for some snacks and you giving us attitude already?" "No attitude. Just asking if you're here to shop." Darlene positioned herself behind the register, her body language open but her weight balanced. Old habits, the 5 of them, spread out through the small store, and Darlene didn't like it one bit. 2 headed toward the back where the refrigerators were. 1 started browsing the chip aisle with too much interest. The other 2 stayed near the front, but not in a casual way. They were positioning themselves, creating angles. It was tactical, even if they didn't realize they were being tactical. "Hey, fat lady, you got a problem with us being here?" Another one called out from the back. The last customer in the store, an elderly man Darlene knew as Mr. Roberts, quickly grabbed his items and practically ran to the register. His hands shook as he put money on the counter. Darlene rang him up quickly, her eyes never leaving the 5 young men. "You be safe now, Mr. Roberts," she said quietly. He nodded, not making eye contact with anyone, and hurried out. The bell chimed behind him, and now it was just Darlene and the 5 troublemakers. "Looks like you scared away all your customers," the leader laughed. "Bad for business, ain't it?" One of them grabbed a bag of chips and ripped it open right there in the aisle, stuffing chips in his mouth without any intention of paying. Another knocked over a display of canned goods, sending them rolling across the floor. The crashes echoed in the small space. "Hey now, that's enough," Darlene said, her voice dropping into a register she hadn't used in 3 years. It was the voice that had commanded soldiers, the voice that meant business. "You need to leave. Right now." "Or what?" The leader walked right up to the counter now, getting in her face. "What you gonna do, Big Mama? Sit on us?" His friends found this hilarious. One of them was already pulling out his phone, starting to record. They thought this was entertainment. They thought she was a joke, a target, something to mock and push around because she didn't fit their idea of someone who could fight back. Darlene looked at each of them in turn, her expression calm, but her mind calculating. 5 opponents. Limited space. Civilians potentially walking by outside. 1 possible weapon in the hand of the guy near the drink coolers. He kept touching something in his pocket. The leader was the most aggressive, but probably not the most dangerous. The quiet one in the back, he was the one to watch. "I'm asking you one more time," Darlene said slowly, clearly. "Leave my store." The leader smiled, mean and confident. Then he reached across the counter and shoved her, hard, trying to get to the register behind her. That's when everything changed. The shove wasn't particularly hard, but it crossed a line. Darlene felt herself take 1 step back, her hip bumping against the cigarette display behind the counter. For a split second, the store was completely silent, except for the hum of the refrigerators and someone's phone camera recording everything. The leader's hand was still stretched across the counter, reaching for the register. His friends had stopped laughing. They were waiting to see what would happen next, their faces showing that particular mixture of excitement and nervousness that came right before things got really bad. This was the moment they'd been building toward since they walked through that door. Darlene's hands were steady as she stepped back up to the counter. Her heart rate hadn't changed. Her breathing was normal. 20 years of training had taught her body not to panic even when her mind recognized danger, especially when her mind recognized danger. "You just made a mistake," she said quietly. "Oh yeah? What mistake was that?" The leader leaned further over the counter, emboldened by her apparent calmness. He thought she was scared. He thought she was weak. "You gonna call the cops? Go ahead. We'll be 3 blocks away before they even get the call." One of his friends jumped over the counter entirely, landing in the small space behind the register where Darlene stood. Now, there were 2 of them, in her space and 3 more blocking any easy exit to the front door. They had her surrounded, or at least they thought they did. "Yo, check it out." The one behind the counter started pulling open the register drawer. "Let's see what Fat Mama's got in here." The phone camera was still recording, the kid holding it getting closer to catch every angle. They were going to post this online. They were going to laugh about it with their friends, the fat black lady who got robbed in her own store. They probably already had captions planned out in their heads. "Last chance," Darlene said, and something in her voice made the one with the phone hesitate for just a second. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pleading. It was something else entirely, something that sounded like a promise. The leader must not have heard it, or maybe he just didn't care. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a knife. Not a big one, maybe 4 inches of blade, but big enough. The fluorescent lights caught the edge of it as he held it up, making sure everyone could see. "You know what? I'm tired of your mouth," he said, waving the knife casually like it was a toy. "How about you open that register yourself and give us everything in there? Plus whatever you got in the safe. And maybe, just maybe, we don't mess up your face." The others laughed again, that nervous laugh that came from kids who were in over their heads but couldn't back down now. Not in front of their friends. Not with the camera rolling. They'd committed to this path and now they had to see it through. Darlene looked at the knife. Then she looked at the young man holding it. He couldn't have been more than 22, 23 at most. Still had acne scars on his cheeks. Probably had a mother somewhere who worried about him every night he didn't come home. Probably had dreams once before life and bad choices brought him to this moment. For a brief second, Darlene wasn't in her store anymore. She was back in a dusty compound halfway across the world, facing down someone else with a weapon who thought they had the advantage. She remembered her drill instructor's voice, gravelly and sharp. "You don't fight angry. You fight smart. You fight to survive and protect. Everything else is ego." She thought about the 20 years she'd spent learning how to handle situations exactly like this one, the countless hours of hand-to-hand combat training, the muscle memory that never really went away, even after 3 years of civilian life, the reflexes that had been drilled into her until they became as automatic as breathing. She thought about Mrs. Chen, who came in every morning for her coffee, about little Deshawn, who saved his allowance to buy candy bars on Fridays, about Mr. Roberts, who'd just left, his hands shaking with fear. This was their store too, their safe place in a neighborhood that didn't have enough safe places. "Okay," Darlene said, holding up her hands slowly. "Okay, you win." The leader smiled, thinking he'd broken her. "That's what I thought. Now open it up." Darlene moved toward the register, her movement slow and deliberate. The one who'd jumped behind the counter with her stepped back slightly, giving her room to work. The knife was still pointed in her direction, maybe 2 feet away from her chest. The others relaxed a little bit, thinking the hard part was over. That's when Darlene moved. Her hand shot out faster than anyone expected from a woman her size, grabbing the wrist of the hand holding the knife. The leader's eyes went wide with surprise as she twisted his wrist in a specific direction. A move she'd practiced 10,000 times until it became instinct. The knife clattered to the floor before he even understood what was happening. The store erupted into chaos, the one behind the counter with her lunged forward, trying to grab her from behind. Darlene shifted her weight, let him commit to the movement, then used his own momentum against him. A quick hip check and he went stumbling into the cigarette display, sending packs flying everywhere. The leader, now without his knife and holding his twisted wrist, tried to throw a punch with his other hand. Darlene had seen it coming before he'd even made the decision to throw it. She ducked under it easily, stepped inside his reach and drove her palm up into his solar plexus. Not hard enough to seriously injure, but hard enough to knock the wind completely out of him. He made a sound like a balloon deflating and staggered backward, gasping for air. 2 down, 3 to go. The one with the phone had stopped recording. He was just standing there, mouth open, trying to process what he was seeing. The other 2 had frozen for a crucial second, and Darlene used that second to kick the knife across the floor, sending it sliding under the candy rack where no one could easily get to it. "You crazy," one of them finally yelled, finding his voice. "You crazy lady." The one who'd been behind the counter recovered and came at her again, this time more carefully. He tried to grab her arm, probably thinking he could use his size advantage to pin her down. Darlene let him get a grip, then executed a textbook arm drag that sent him flying over her shoulder. He landed hard on the floor behind the counter, groaning. The leader had gotten his breath back enough to try again. His face was red, veins popping in his neck from anger and embarrassment. He rushed at her like a football player going for a tackle. Darlene sidestepped at the last possible second, grabbed the back of his jacket as he went past and used his own speed to guide him face first into the counter. There was a solid thunk as his nose made contact with the formica surface. "Stop!" the one with the phone finally shouted. "Just stop, man. Let's get out of here." But the door was locked. Darlene had triggered the security lock when the leader first pulled out the knife, a safety feature she'd installed 6 months ago. The magnetic lock wouldn't open without the release button behind the counter or a key from outside. They weren't going anywhere. The leader was on his knees now, blood dripping from his nose onto the floor. The one who'd been behind the counter was still down, holding his shoulder where he'd landed wrong. The other three were backed up against the door, their earlier confidence completely gone. Darlene pulled out her cell phone, keeping her eyes on all five of them. Her thumb moved across the screen with practiced ease, hitting the emergency call button. She raised the phone to her ear, her voice completely calm and professional. "Yes, this is Darlene Washington at Washington's Corner Store on 5th and Madison. I have 5 individuals here who just attempted armed robbery. I've detained them using necessary force. Please send officers immediately." The operator's voice crackled through the phone, asking if she was injured, if the suspects were armed, if she was in immediate danger. Darlene answered each question clearly, her military training evident in how she communicated. Location, situation, status, action taken. The 5 young men just stared at her. The one with the phone had dropped it on the floor. The recording was still going, capturing everything from a sideways angle on the ground. The leader's blood was pooling on the linoleum. Someone was crying, though Darlene couldn't tell which one. "Ma'am, officers are 3 minutes out," the operator said. "Can you stay on the line?" "I can stay on the line," Darlene confirmed, her eyes never leaving the 5 people who'd made the worst decision of their young lives. Outside, she could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. The sirens got louder until they were right outside, followed by the squeal of tires and the slam of car doors. Red and blue lights flickered through the store windows, painting everything in alternating colors. Darlene stayed exactly where she was, phone still to her ear, her body positioned so she could see all 5 young men at once. "Officers are entering now." "Ma'am," the operator said. "Copy that," Darlene responded, and even through her fear and adrenaline, she had to smile a little at herself. "Copy that." 3 years out of the military, and she still talked like she was on a radio in a combat zone. The first officer through the door was Rodriguez, a 10-year veteran of the Oakland PD, who'd been coming into Darlene's store since the week she opened. He took in the scene with experienced eyes. 5 young men, 3 standing with their hands up, 2 on the ground, blood on the floor, merchandise scattered everywhere, and Darlene behind the counter, calm as could be, like this was just another Tuesday night. "Sergeant Major," Rodriguez said, and there might have been the tiniest hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "You want to tell me what happened here?" 3 more officers came in behind him, hands on their weapons but not drawn. They quickly moved to secure the 5 suspects, separating them and checking for additional weapons. One of them kicked something under the candy rack and came up with the knife, holding it carefully by the tip. "These gentlemen came into my store about 15 minutes ago," Darlene said, her voice steady. "They began harassing customers, damaged property, and then attempted to rob me at knife point. I defended myself and my business using reasonable force. Everything's on camera." She pointed to the security cameras mounted in the corners of the store. Rodriguez nodded, already mentally writing his report. This wasn't going to be a complicated case. The leader was being helped to his feet by an officer, his hands being cuffed behind his back. His nose had stopped bleeding, but his face was already swelling up. He looked at Darlene with a mixture of pain, anger, and something that might have been disbelief. "She assaulted us," he tried to say, his voice nasal from his injured nose. "We were just shopping and she went crazy on us." "Save it," Rodriguez said flatly. He'd already spotted the phone on the ground, still recording. "Martinez, bag that phone as evidence." One of the suspects, the one who'd been doing the recording, started crying for real now. Not the quiet tears of someone in pain, but the sobbing of someone who suddenly understood how much trouble they were in. "My mom's gonna kill me," he kept saying. "My mom's gonna kill me." An EMT crew arrived and started checking everyone for injuries. They looked at the leader's nose, declared it probably broken but not seriously, and put an ice pack on it. They checked the one who'd landed hard on his shoulder, said it might be dislocated, and stabilized it with a sling. Then they came over to Darlene. "Ma'am, are you hurt at all?" the EMT asked, a young woman who looked fresh out of training. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Darlene said. "Not a scratch on me. Any pain?" Shortness of breath? Dizziness? "Nothing. I'm okay, really." The EMT looked her over anyway, checking her pupils, taking her pulse, asking her to follow a finger with her eyes. Standard protocol after a violent incident. When she was satisfied that Darlene was telling the truth, she packed up her kit and moved on to finish with the suspects. Rodriguez came back over with his notepad. "Okay, let's get your statement. Start from the beginning." Darlene walked him through it step by step. How they'd come in loud and aggressive. How they'd harassed her and the other customers. How they'd damaged property. How one had jumped behind the counter and another had pulled a knife. How she'd asked them repeatedly to leave. How she'd only acted when they'd made it physical and threatened her life. "And you're trained in hand-to-hand combat?" Rodriguez asked, though he already knew the answer. 20 years Army. Sergeant Major, retired. I've had more training than most people get in a lifetime. That checks out, Rodriguez said, looking at the scene again. 5-on-1 and you're the only person not injured. That's some impressive work. I didn't want to hurt anyone, Darlene said, and she meant it. I just wanted them out of my store. Well, they're out now, Rodriguez said. They're going to county lockup, and I'd bet money they're looking at serious charges. Armed robbery, assault, property damage, maybe hate crime enhancements depending on what they said to you. They said plenty, Darlene confirmed. Camera got the audio too. Outside, more people were gathering. Neighbors who'd heard the sirens. The owner of the barbershop next door. Mrs. Chen from across the street in her bathrobe and slippers. Word traveled fast in this neighborhood, especially when something happened at Darlene's store. The 5 suspects were being loaded into squad cars, each one looking more miserable than the last. The leader caught Darlene's eye one more time as they put him in the back seat. She thought maybe, just maybe, she saw a flash of something like respect there, or maybe it was just the pain talking. Rodriguez closed his notepad. I'm going to need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. Bring a copy of the security footage if you can. But for tonight, you're good to go. We'll keep one unit out here for a while. Make sure there's no retaliation from their friends. Appreciate that, officer. Rodriguez. After 3 years, I think you can call me Rodriguez. Darlene smiled at that. Appreciate it, Rodriguez. The officers started clearing out, taking evidence bags full of the knife, the phone, empty bags of chips, spray paint cans the suspects had used to tag the wall. The crime scene tape went up across the front door. The store was officially closed for the night. Maybe longer, depending on how long the investigation took. When the last squad car pulled away, Darlene finally let herself sit down on the stool behind the counter. Her hands weren't shaking. Her heart rate was normal, but she felt tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. It was the kind of tired that came from having to be hard when you wanted to be soft, from having to hurt people when you wanted to help them. Mr. Rodriguez from the barbershop came to the door, knocking gently even though it was locked. Darlene got up and let him in. You okay, Darlene? He asked, genuine concern in his weathered face. I'm okay, Eddie. I saw the whole thing from my window. Called 911 soon as I saw that knife. Those punks didn't know who they were messing with. No, they didn't. More neighbors came by. Mrs. Chen brought tea in a thermos. Young Deshawn's mother came with her son to make sure Darlene was all right. The owner of the laundromat offered to help clean up the mess. Even Mr. Roberts, who'd run out earlier, came back to apologize for leaving. You got nothing to apologize for, Darlene told him. You did exactly right. You got yourself safe. By midnight, the store was cleaned up as much as it could be. The damaged products were in trash bags. The blood was scrubbed off the floor. The spray paint on the wall would need professional cleaning, but someone had already covered it with a sheet. The neighborhood had taken care of its own. Darlene locked up and walked to her car, parked in the small lot behind the building. Her phone had been buzzing for the last hour, but she'd ignored it. Now she looked. 37 missed calls, 63 text messages, and counting. One of the texts was from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it and found a video link. Her heart sank. The footage from the suspect's phone had already made it online somehow. Probably posted before the police had secured the device, or maybe a backup that uploaded automatically. She clicked the link, not sure she wanted to see it, but knowing she needed to. The video started with them walking into the store. It caught everything. The insults, the harassment, her warnings, the knife, and then her response, quick and efficient and undeniable. The video had been posted 30 minutes ago. It already had 50,000 views. The comment section was exploding. Most of them were supportive, defending her actions, praising her skill. But some were ugly, saying terrible things about her appearance, her race, questioning whether she'd used excessive force. And there, in the caption, the person who'd uploaded it had written, Gang harasses fat black lady at her store. Seconds later, she uses military training to end it. Darlene stared at the screen for a long moment. Fat black lady. The same words they'd used to mock her. But somehow seeing it written out like that, with 50,000 people watching her defend herself, it didn't hurt the same way. She turned off her phone and drove home through the empty streets, already knowing that tomorrow, everything would be different. Darlene woke up to her phone vibrating so hard it fell off the nightstand. She squinted at the alarm clock. 6 in the morning. She'd only been asleep for 4 hours, and her body felt every minute of the previous night's confrontation. Not pain exactly, just that deep muscle awareness that came from using her body in ways she hadn't in 3 years. She picked up the phone from the floor and immediately wished she hadn't. 214 missed calls. Her voicemail was full. Her text messages had stopped loading because there were too many. And her social media accounts, which she barely ever used, were exploding with notifications. The video had gone viral. Not just viral like a few thousand views. Viral like millions of views across multiple platforms. Someone had screen recorded it before it got taken down from the original account and reposted it everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. It was spreading faster than she could track. She scrolled through some of the comments while she made coffee, her old coffee maker gurgling and hissing in the quiet kitchen. The comments were a mix of everything. Support, criticism, amazement, anger, jokes, memes. People were calling her a hero. People were calling her dangerous. People were making her into a symbol for things she'd never intended to symbolize. One comment had over 40,000 likes. This is what happens when you underestimate someone based on how they look. Respect to this woman. Another with nearly as many said, excessive force. She should be arrested. Those are someone's children. Darlene set the phone down and rubbed her eyes. Someone's children? That part was true, at least. Those 5 young men had mothers who were probably crying right now. Had families who were disappointed or angry or scared. She thought about that while she drank her coffee, standing at her kitchen window watching the sun come up over Oakland. Her phone rang. An actual call this time, not a text. She looked at the screen. It was her daughter calling from Atlanta. Mom, oh my God, are you okay? I just saw the video. Why didn't you call me? I'm fine, baby. It was late, I didn't want to worry you. Didn't want to worry me? Mom, you were attacked. With a knife. That video is everywhere. My coworkers are sending it to me asking if that's my mother. It's me, Darlene confirmed, sitting down at her kitchen table. And I handled it. Nobody got seriously hurt and the police took care of everything. Mom, the news is calling. Have you talked to any reporters? No, why would I do that? Because this is huge. You're trending on Twitter. There are news vans probably headed to your house right now. Darlene looked out her front window. Sure enough, there was a white van with a satellite dish pulling up across the street. Then another one. Her daughter wasn't exaggerating. I have to go, Darlene said. I'll call you later, okay? I love you, Mom, wait. Just be careful what you say, okay? Everything's going to be recorded and analyzed, and Mom, I'm proud of you. Darlene hung up and watched as reporters started setting up on her front lawn. She wasn't ready for this. She needed to get dressed, needed to think, needed to figure out what to say. But they were already knocking on her door. By 8 in the morning, she'd given 3 interviews from her porch, all saying basically the same thing. She'd defended herself in her business. She was trained to handle dangerous situations. She hoped the young men would get the help they needed. No, she didn't feel like a hero. No, she wasn't angry. Yes, she'd do it again if she had to. The reporters asked about the insults, about what they'd called her. She could see them wanting her to be angry about it, to make it into a bigger story about disrespect and body shaming. But Darlene had learned a long time ago that other people's opinions about her body weren't her problem to carry. They were trying to make me feel small, she told one reporter. They saw what they wanted to see, a target, an easy victim. What they didn't see was 20 years of training, and a woman who wasn't going to let anyone take what she'd worked for. That quote made it onto the national news by noon. Darlene drove to the police station to give her formal statement. And there were cameras there too. She kept her head down, walked in quickly, and spent 2 hours going over everything again with a detective. They showed her the security footage from multiple angles. They had her identify each suspect and what they'd done. They explained that all 5 were being charged with attempted armed robbery, assault, vandalism, and yes, because of the specific nature of their insults, hate crime enhancements were being considered. They're looking at serious time, the detective said, especially the one with the knife. He's got priors, what about the others? Darlene asked. Couple of them have clean records. First offense. They'll probably plea down, get probation, community service, but they're going to carry this with them. Darlene thought about that. 19, 20 years old, and their lives were going to be permanently marked by one stupid decision. She didn't feel sorry for them exactly. They'd made their choices, but she didn't take any joy in it either. When she finally made it to her store around 2 in the afternoon, there was a crowd outside. Not a threatening crowd, a supportive one. Neighbors had put up a banner that said, "We stand with Darlene." Someone had brought flowers. There were cards and letters stacked by the door. Mrs. Chen hugged her so tight Darlene thought her ribs might crack. "You are so brave. So brave." Eddie from the barbershop shook his head in amazement. "I've been telling everyone, don't mess with Sergeant Major Washington. But nobody listens to me." Young Deshawn held up his phone. "Miss Darlene, you're famous. My friends at school are all talking about you. Can I get a picture?" She took pictures with what felt like half the neighborhood. She read some of the cards. She accepted the flowers and the gratitude and the attention even though it made her uncomfortable. This wasn't who she was. She wasn't someone who wanted to be famous. She just wanted to run her store and take care of her community. But the calls kept coming. A producer from a morning talk show wanted her to fly to New York. A publisher wanted to talk about a book deal. Veterans organizations wanted her to speak at events. A self-defense company wanted to sponsor her. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, wanted to use her face and her experience for something. By the end of the day, Darlene had turned down most of the offers. But there was one message that made her pause. It was from the local community center, just 3 blocks from her store. The director had called asking if Darlene would be willing to teach a self-defense class. Nothing fancy, nothing for money. Just basic skills for women in the neighborhood who wanted to feel safer. That message Darlene returned. The district attorney called that evening while she was closing up the store. The 5 suspects had been arraigned. 4 of them had families who'd posted bail. The leader, the one with the knife and the prior record, was being held without bail. They were offering plea deals to the younger ones in exchange for testimony. "What kind of time are we talking about?" Darlene asked. "For the leader, maybe 5 to 7 years if he takes a plea. For the others, probation, suspended sentences, community service if they cooperate. They're young, no serious priors. Judge will probably go easy on them. And if I asked you to go easy on all of them, what would that do?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You want to go easy on them? After what they did?" "I want them to have a chance to do better," Darlene said. "I want them to learn something. I don't know if prison's going to teach them anything except how to be better criminals." That's very generous of you, Ms. Washington. I'll take it under consideration. But the knife, the threats, the recording, it's all pretty damning. Some consequences have to happen. I understand. I remember being young and stupid once. Not that stupid, but still. People deserve second chances. That night, Darlene sat in her living room and finally watched the whole video from beginning to end. It was strange seeing herself from outside. Seeing how she'd moved, how she'd stayed calm, how she'd ended the situation in less than a minute. The comment section had grown to over 100,000 messages. Some people were analyzing her technique. Former military members were identifying the specific moves she'd used. Self-defense instructors were breaking down what she'd done right. Other people were just amazed that someone who looked like her could move like that. One comment stuck with her. It was from someone claiming to be a teacher at a local high school. "I'm showing this to my students tomorrow. Not because of the violence, but because of the restraint. She could have hurt them much worse. She chose not to. That's real strength." Darlene closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while, thinking about strength, about choices, about what it meant to be seen. For 52 years, she'd lived her life being underestimated, being judged by people who thought they knew what she was capable of just by looking at her. Maybe that video, as uncomfortable as it made her, would make some people think twice. Not just about her, but about everyone they dismissed or mocked or underestimated. Maybe that was worth something. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from the community center. "We had 60 women sign up for your class in 2 hours. Can you do 2 sessions?" Darlene smiled in the darkness and typed back, "I can do 2 sessions." 6 months changed everything. The first self-defense class Darlene taught had been chaotic. 60 women crammed into the community center gym, ranging from teenagers to grandmothers, all wanting to learn what she knew. She'd been nervous, unsure if she could actually teach what had become muscle memory to her. But the moment she stepped in front of that group and saw their faces, eager and hopeful and a little scared, something clicked into place. She wasn't just teaching them how to throw a punch or escape a grab. She was teaching them to believe they could defend themselves. That their bodies, whatever size or shape, were capable of more than the world told them. That being underestimated could be an advantage if you knew how to use it. Now, every Saturday and Wednesday evening, Darlene taught 2 classes at the community center. The groups had grown smaller as the initial curiosity wore off, but the 20 or so women who kept coming back were serious. They practiced. They asked questions. They pushed themselves. And slowly, Darlene watched them transform from people who were afraid into people who were ready. Mrs. Chen came to every class, despite being 73 years old. "I'm tired of being scared when I walk to my car at night," she'd said on the first day. Now she could break someone's grip and create distance to run. It wasn't much, but it was something. The store had changed too. Business had actually picked up after everything happened. People came from across the city just to meet her, to shop at the place where it all went down. Some came with genuine respect. Others came out of curiosity, wanting to see if she was really real. Darlene treated them all the same, ringing up their purchases with the same warmth she'd always had. The spray-painted wall had been cleaned, but Darlene had decided to put up a mural there instead. A local artist, a young woman named Joy who came to the self-defense classes, had painted it for free. It showed hands of different colors reaching up toward stars with words painted along the bottom. Strength comes in every form. The court cases had been resolved. The leader, the one with the knife, had taken a plea deal. 3 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months if he completed anger management and job training programs. The others had gotten probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. One of them had to write a letter of apology to Darlene as part of his sentence. The letter had arrived 3 months ago. It was awkward and clearly written with help from a lawyer, but there was one line that seemed genuine. "I never thought about how my words could hurt someone until I saw how wrong I was about everything." "I'm sorry," Darlene had written back. Just a short note saying she accepted his apology and hoped he'd use this as a chance to become better. She didn't know if he'd actually read it or if it would make any difference, but she'd sent it anyway. The video had eventually stopped trending, replaced by newer stories and fresher outrages, but it hadn't disappeared. It lived on in think pieces and viral compilations and self-defense forums. Darlene had been invited to speak at a veterans convention in San Diego, and she'd actually gone, her first time on a plane in 3 years. Standing in front of 500 former service members, talking about transitioning to civilian life and staying ready even when you weren't in uniform anymore, had felt right in a way nothing else had since she'd retired. Today was Wednesday, which meant a self-defense class at 6. But first, Darlene had a visitor at the store. Officer Rodriguez had called ahead, asking if he could stop by with someone who wanted to meet her. She'd agreed, curious about who it might be. They arrived just after the lunch rush. Rodriguez came in first, followed by a young man Darlene recognized immediately. He was thinner than she remembered, and his nose was slightly crooked now from where it had been broken. The leader. The one with the knife. The one who'd called her names and threatened her life. Darlene's hand moved instinctively toward the panic button under the counter, but Rodriguez held up his hand. "It's okay. He's with me. He wanted to talk to you, and I thought it might be good for both of you." The young man stood awkwardly near the door, not quite making eye contact. He looked younger than Darlene remembered, barely more than a kid despite being in his mid-20s. Prison had left its mark on him. You could see it in the way he carried himself, more careful now, less cocky. "I don't have to do this," Darlene said, not unkindly. "You understand that?" "I know," the young man said, his voice quiet. "Officer Rodriguez said you might not want to see me. I wanted to say something in person." Darlene looked at Rodriguez, who nodded encouragement. She came around the counter but kept some distance between them. "Okay, I'm listening." The young man took a breath. "I'm not going to make excuses for what I did. I came in here looking for trouble because I thought it would make me look tough. I saw you and I made assumptions. Really stupid assumptions. And then when you defended yourself, I got angrier because you made me look like a fool. He finally looked up at her. I spent 3 months in county before my sentencing, and another 3 in state before I got into the work program. And the whole time, all I could think about was that video. Everyone in there had seen it. Everyone knew I got beat by. He stopped himself. I was going to say something about your size, but that's the whole problem, isn't it? I kept judging people by what they looked like instead of who they were. That's a start, Darlene said carefully. In the program, they made us talk about our victims, made us really think about the harm we caused, and I realized I don't even know your name. I threatened your life, I tried to rob you, I said terrible things to you, and I never even knew your name. It's Darlene. Darlene Washington. Ms. Washington, I'm sorry. For all of it. For scaring you, for disrespecting you, for putting you in a position where you had to defend yourself. You didn't deserve any of that. Darlene studied him for a long moment. She'd thought about this confrontation before, wondered what she'd say if she ever saw him again. She'd imagined being angry, being cold, being dismissive. But now that he was standing here, genuinely trying to make amends, she felt something different. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. You know what scared me most that night? Darlene asked. Not the knife. Not the 5 of you against 1 of me. What scared me was thinking about what kind of world we live in where young men think that's okay, where you can walk into someone's business and treat them like garbage because you think they can't fight back. I know, he said quietly. But here's the thing. You're here now. You're trying to do better. That counts for something. She paused. What's your name? Travis. Travis, I accept your apology. I hope you use your second chance well. I hope you become the kind of man who stands up when he sees someone being disrespected, instead of being the one doing the disrespecting. I'm trying, ma'am. I got 6 months left of probation and I'm working at a warehouse. It's not much, but it's honest work. And I'm taking classes at night trying to get my GED. That's good. That's real good. Travis nodded, seeming lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying something heavy and finally got to put it down. Thank you for seeing me, and thank you for going easy on us. Officer Rodriguez told me you talked to the DA about giving us a chance. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment, Darlene said. After they left, Darlene stood in her store for a while, thinking about second chances and forgiveness and how complicated people were. She thought about the 5 young men who'd changed her life and how she'd changed theirs. She thought about the women in her self-defense classes, learning to stand up for themselves. She thought about the community that had rallied around her, and the strangers across the country who'd been inspired by a 60-second video. That evening, she taught her class like always. 23 women this time, including 2 new faces. They practiced their stances, their blocks, their strikes. They learned about awareness and de-escalation, and when to run versus when to fight. And Darlene watched them grow stronger, not just physically, but in the way they carried themselves. At the end of class, one of the new women, a young mother who looked exhausted, raised her hand. Ms. Washington, can I ask you something? Of course. Were you scared? That night, Darlene thought about lying, about saying no because that's what people expected. But these women deserved the truth. Yeah, I was scared. Fear is normal. It's what you do with the fear that matters. You can let it paralyze you, or you can let it sharpen your focus. I chose to focus. The woman nodded, understanding something important. As Darlene locked up the community center and walked to her car, she passed the barber shop where Eddie was closing up. He waved. Mrs. Chen was watering her flowers across the street, and she called out goodnight. Young Deshawn rode by on his bike, heading home before dark like his mother insisted. This was her neighborhood, her community, her life. And yes, one terrible night had made her famous for a while, had put her face on screens across the country. But in the end, what mattered most was right here. The people who knew her name, who counted on her, who trusted her. Darlene drove home through streets she knew by heart, thinking about how far she'd come from that scared kid who joined the army at 18, thinking about all the battles she'd fought, both in uniform and out of it, thinking about the difference between being tough and being strong, and how she'd finally learned that real strength was knowing when to fight and when to forgive. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter. Love you. Mom, proud of you every day. Darlene smiled and typed back, Love you too, baby. and that more than anything else was enough.